In the late 1980s, an animator by the name of Chris Sanders wrote a short story called The Big Bear Aircraft Company. Chris Sanders used this story as a way to illustrate how Disney as a company preferred to release films that were exactly like other films that they've released instead of taking the risk on new ideas. Years after writing The Big Bear Aircraft Company, Chris Sanders even gave Mulan as an example of this. He didn't like how the writers of Mulan were spending a lot of time talking about the manner in which the villain had to die instead of asking themselves why the villain needed to die at all. After some time, Chris Sanders was finally able to put his ideals to the test with his directorial debut, Lilo and Stitch. Chris Sanders has described the story of Lilo and Stitch as one where a villain becomes a hero. The very beginning of the film describes Stitch as a biological weapon of destruction and chaos. However, by the end of the movie, Stitch goes from being a killing machine to finding a family that he loves and protects. After leaving Disney, Chris Sanders will make another film that questions the role that villains play in stories. That film is How to Train Your Dragon. But instead of villains becoming heroes, it's the main characters who have to realize that the villains were never villains at all. Going back to Lilo and Stitch, the film differed from its predecessors by also having a unique art style. The art style for the movie is the same art style that Chris Sanders has. This is an art style that went away from straight lines and sharp corners in favor of round edges. You can see this in the way that the characters are drawn as well as inanimate objects, including the spaceships. The film also uses watercolor backgrounds, a technique that has largely been abandoned since the 1940s. They did this in order to get the bright colors that you would normally see in a storybook. Lilo and Stitch, with its impressive story and unique art style, paved the way for future Disney and Pixar films like Moana and Coco. There's a lot that a studio can learn from looking at Lilo and Stitch and how it changed the formula for Disney. However, if I want to be more specific, there's a lot that Marvel Studios can learn from all of this. Marvel Studios has had an impressive ride for the past 10 years. However, over 10 years, it's clear to everybody that Marvel Studios has a formula. It's like, hey, let's introduce good guy. Here comes bad guy. They fight. Movie's done. And don't get me wrong, I love Marvel films. But this is really the only thing they've been doing. What's interesting is that there have been other comic book films that have been released outside of Marvel that seem to understand this better than Marvel does. Films like Logan and Joker. But who knows, maybe Marvel Studios is working on something totally new and original as we speak. As I've said, I'm a huge Marvel Studios fan, but even I want to see what would happen if they decide to do something different.